Welcome to the Mental Advantage Podcast. Whether you're an athlete trying to perform at your best when it counts the most, a coach or business leader trying to get more out of your team, or someone looking for more personal growth, this is the place for you. This podcast is your map to guide you to the right mindset, systems, and strategies you need to become the best version of yourself. And now, here's John Cullen and Brandon Allen.
All right, welcome to the show. Tonight, we have Zach Cohen, who's the founder of ACME Mental Performance. Brandon, somebody that, you'll hear in the interview we heard about from friend of the show, Sean O'Neill. And I'm glad that Sean kind of gave us the heads up on him because he is really, we say all the time, I mean, this show has afforded us the opportunity to talk to a lot of really interesting people and you learn their backgrounds and stuff like that. But I just have so much respect for those that are out there, not only coaches, we have a special place in our heart, of course, for coaches, but also those that are just working on that mental performance side of things. Because, that's why we're doing what we're doing is, we know how important it is.
For sure. And I think it's, it's important for the athletes to have people, like Zach, out there kind of leading the fighting the good fight and leading them down the path. And I think what the listeners will hear is, a guy that's passionate about the mental performance side of things, a guy that is looking for any way to help the athlete, whether that's, the mental side or even the physical side, right? Because he talks about how he's still coaching volleyball. And I just think we do have a soft spot for coaches and for people that are pouring into athletes and kids and youth for today, right? That kind of put them on the right path. Because as we get into it a little bit, we talk about how anxiety seems to be a prevailing thing, I guess, for many kids right now. And, for most of the kids, they won't play beyond a certain level. But if they can learn some of the tools and skill sets that, that Zach's trying to do or that we're trying to do here on the podcast, that maybe that helps them down the road.
Yeah, it's being an advocate, really when you think about it. I mean, he's being an advocate for those young players to, not only is he showing them, as you point out, that, he's on their side, but it's also sometimes you have to kind of be a reminder or give some perspective to some of the parents and that are involved in their lives as well. I mean, as we talk about on the show, it sometimes probably comes across like we are being a little bit harsh to the parents, but the reality of it is it's not, it's helping them see the blind spot because they all want to do well by their kids. They're all trying to do well by their kids. And so when we say things like, hey, parents, be careful of this, be careful of that, we're not doing it like, number one, we've probably made some similar mistakes in our.
Oh, I know I have.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's not like we're coming at it from a standpoint of like, hey, we're catching you doing it wrong. We're just saying we've made some of those mistakes. We can see it in others, and now that we're coming at it, and we've learned. Right. Yeah.
To your point, we're coming at it from, hey, my eyes may have been opened a little bit because of either research or someone we've spoken to or whatever. And it's there. At no point is it ever that a parent isn't trying to do the best for their kid.
Yeah,
I don't know of any parent who does not have the desire or is trying to do the best for their kid. It's just that sometimes it can be really intense or it could be a number of things. And I think, I have it's a challenge for me. To this day, we talk about it all the time. Just because we talk about this stuff or that we have exposure more than most as far as this stuff goes, it still doesn't mean that we are able to implement everything that we talk about. There's, poor Knox still has conversations with me on the ride home from a game or whatever. So it's just, to your point, it's not geared as a negative. It's more about, hey, just be aware of this.
One of the things that the listeners aren't privy to, because we should do a better job of posting these Zoom calls that we're on, but I can't tell you how many times in almost 80 episodes, a guest of ours has said something and one of us gets the look on our face like, I think that might have been me. I think he might be talking about me.
It's kind of like being in church and the pastor says something, you're like, oh gosh, where was he? How did he know that? So
I'm like, was that bad? Should I have not done that?
I shouldn't have done that. You're saying that's not what to do. Oh, okay.
Too bad we didn't have this about 10 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, again, Zach Cohen, I talk about it in the interview, but just as a reminder, his website's ACMEmentality.com. And I think just a really cool guy, somebody that will be, repeat guest on the show. Mm-hmm. And we just tap into some of the things that he's doing to work with some of the players he's had the opportunity to work with. And he shares some of his systems that he's putting into place. And I think the listeners will really get a lot out of this one.
Absolutely. I think they'll enjoy it.
Yep. So get your pen and paper ready. Here is Zach Cohen. All right, welcome into the show. I guess we've kind of already went through that, Brandon, but we have a really great guest. I'm so excited to get this thing started tonight. Zach Cohen, who is a mental performance coach, has his master's degree in sport and performance psychology from University of Western States. He's done his undergrad at SUNY Cortland up in New York, and just somebody that, our good friend, and I know the listeners will be familiar with Sean O'Neill, a few weeks ago was like, hey, there's somebody that you all would really be interested in having a conversation with. And we couldn't wait to get him on the show. So Zach, thanks for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get this conversation started.
Absolutely. So why don't we do this, Zach? We haven't done this in a little while, but kind of take us back, if you would, just to maybe, what it was about. I don't know if it was sometime maybe in high school or when did you first start getting into mental performance, sports psychology, or no, that was an avenue you wanted to pursue?
Sure. Yeah. So actually it was later on in life for me. It wasn't until after undergrad and college that I started coaching a sport, which ended up being girls club volleyball. I picked up volleyball as a sport personally in college in intramurals with some people on my floor. I never knew really that much about the sport. I played basketball a little bit in high school, was overall an athlete, just never took high school and youth sport up through a college level. But so I started to play with them, and then started going to adult clinics later in life after college, locally here on Long Island. Learned a lot more about the game and what it means to play the game correctly. And from there, started playing in leagues and eventually got asked to become a coach. And I started coaching 13-year-old girls. And then for the past now, at least almost 9 years, that's sprouted into coaching mostly 15s to 17s, primarily 16s, at varying kind of levels. And my love of sport has kind of grown from there. And mental performance wise, to be honest, I never quite found my footing in the business of sport. My prior degrees, as you kind of mentioned, my undergrad was in Cortland. It was actually in sport management. And then my a master's degree I eventually did a few years later after undergrad was also in sport management, thinking that I was really just going to push through and, become maybe a sales professional with a pro team or minor leagues, or do marketing, advertising, any kind of avenue within the business side, but being tied to sport in some way. Kind of got lost in the shuffle for a couple of years, didn't ultimately find footing in there. But I always kept sport close to my chest. I was a huge sporting fan. Of course, spent a lot of time every March watching March Madness, like the rest of us, I'm sure, and just never kind of let that go. It's probably where I spend most of my time on TV, was still with sport, and now then coaching and keeping any kind of game to as a passion and something that's a part of me and who I am. So I coached club for about the last 10 years, and then I included high school. And probably about 6 years ago, I stumbled upon a website that used to kind of be known as Train Ugly, now the Learner Lab, and its creator, Trevor Reagan. And that led to some of the videos I saw that he created and articles about Carol Dweck's growth versus fixed mindset, and his jungle tiger concepts on how the brain works and getting out of our comfort zones. And from that point on, to be honest with you, I was hooked on the idea that the brain can impact performance in such a way that just like we train our bodies. So finding ways to implement such ideas with my own athletes, even though I was just a coach, I spent a ton of time on my own outside of just 2 nights a week of coaching and traveling. I spent a ton of time researching how to maybe implement such mental tactics that I was able to just read and research on my own with teams that I worked with. That led me to books by the likes of Trevor Moawad, and podcasts by Michael Gervais, among others, and great minds kind of in the space. And I just couldn't let it go. And I eventually started to develop my own growth mindset workshops with my teams that I tried to do prior to the season, starting in an attempt to foster learning and overall performance outcomes with them as 16-year-olds, but not something that, to be honest with you, was being done in my club. Every time I asked, before the season started, can I have a Saturday morning before our season gets started and everything really, goes full bore, to try and get the contact information for all my parents, or at least the kids, and reach out, which was kind of always kind of a hard thing to do. Everything wasn't set up yet. And they were like, why do you really need this? And I was like, I want to try to get these kids in here and teach them something different, not just the physical, and see if I can start at least their brains moving, and some team camaraderie, of course, because in club sports, in volleyball, I had them 2 nights a week from 6 to 8 p.m. after they did a full day of school. And most of them showed up and were ready to take a nap before we got started. And, and then 8 o'clock rolls around and they're all running out to get picked up ultimately. And we worked on the physical, and can kind of mention some mental things here and there, but I thought that trying to implement this would be different. And it also kind of, got the parents on board and trust, and built, I think, a rapport with the kids that there was something more to the game than just the physical. So it really just snowballed. It ran from all that start in me playing and learning it, and then being like, there's more to this than there's just, the physical part of sport. And what can I do to bring that out of the kids that I'm working with?
So Zach, is there a thing? So, when you are trying to implement things for 16-year-old girls or really any of the ages that you described, right? Is there one thing that resonates, or that you've found that resonates at that age, from a mental practice or performance standpoint?
Well, first and foremost, I think a lot has to do with the psychological needs of everyone, right? So, I read a lot about the fact that, there's 3 basic psychological needs of competence, relatedness, and autonomy. The biggest one, I think, to me at that age was being relatedness. They want to belong. They want to belong to a team, and they want to have something else going on a little bit. And feel that they are a part of it, and not just, yes, I'm on a team, but they want to feel that. And I always made it a point to introduce myself in a way to them that says that I'm here to help them, not just in sport, but also in life, and talk to them about what else is going on in their day to day, whether that was asking them, just like a parent would, how's your day going? How was the week? What's going on in school? Have you got tests going on? How is that, just asking and trying to meet them where they are and really kind of connect. And that builds a rapport and lets them trust. And then from there, you can kind of introduce other things and make them realize that, hey, this person's trying to teach me something that I could probably take further than just sport. But we're not just here to only focus on the X's and the O's or my skills. And then also the autonomy and giving them an opportunity to have a say in some of the things that we do, allowing them to maybe create practice plans here or there on their own, or at least the last 20 minutes of practice, we can either do this or we can do that, and let them kind of figure it out with each other and decide something. Because ultimately they're the ones on the court, and, I never was. So it's their team as much as it is mine. It's not a dictatorship. I don't think ever works. And the competence is making them all feel that they are competent enough as part of the team, that they have the skills necessary. And if they don't have them, they're learning them, and they can take risks and build an environment that risks are okay. Mistakes, right, are okay to have and to make, and the losses are going to happen just as much as wins will happen. But we're ultimately here to learn and get better in a game, rather than we travel to Philadelphia for a weekend and all we're doing is looking at where this team is from, and kids are scared before we even step on the court because they're like, we're playing so-and-so from Virginia, and we're like, we haven't even seen them yet, but you're already taking yourself out. So how can we now figure out ways to get us to the point where we're not that fearful, and we want to take that on as a challenge? That's kind of, I think, I think that's kind of where you were going with it, but that's kind of where I've been with it.
Well, I can tell you this, Zach, Brandon and I have both been coaching for a long time. And that piece you just talked about there of like psyching yourself out before the game even starts, our sport was baseball and is baseball. And I can't tell you how many times they're like, oh, he's throwing so hard, won't ever hit this guy. And you're like, and it's interesting because one of the things, Zach, I like, about what you're doing with ACME Mentality, and we'll kind of get into some of that, is the fact that on your social media, and we'll cover this with the listeners in the introduction to the show and in the show notes, but you do a good job of sharing kind of some of the things that you're recognizing are important notes, important things in your research and your learning. And you made me think about something I saw on your social media. It was about positive thinking as you're talking about this, because I will say this: when I first got into mental performance coaching, I used to tell people I'm a perspective coach, not a mental performance coach. It's I am trying to get people to think differently. And one of the things is I used to say is, I'm not trying to get you to think more positively. I'm trying to get you to think less negatively, because at that age that you're working with and the people that you are, 15, 16, 17-year-olds or whatever, whether it's social media, whether it's that, connectedness that you're talking about there, that is such a huge deal, because they want to be, accepted, I guess. It kind of is that I'm going to say in air quotes, and our listeners really appreciate when I use air quotes and things they can't see. It really helps for a podcast.
It's a great audio.
All these audio cues.
So you can come up with a sound for it. You gotta.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need to hire the old fashioned guy that does.
You gotta get a soundboard. Yeah,
that's right. But the air quotes would be around the likes kind of society that we're in. Everything's about collecting likes. And so, we can dig into that here in a minute, actually, about social media. But it really is something that if we can get people to think less negatively and really kind of get them back into the moment and less about what somebody else is thinking about them, what the coach really means when they yelled at me, and how they kind of internalize these things. It really is so key, isn't it?
Yes, John. I mean, those things are key. And, Zach, how do you, to kind of piggyback on that, how do you handle, or do you address social media and that kind of instant gratification piece that kids today struggle with? Do you guys address that, or is that just something that is kind of a byproduct of the other things that you try to teach?
I think it's a byproduct of it a little bit.
Sure.
To be honest with you, I think it's something that I, as a mental performance coach, and I think overall should dive into more with them. And it's definitely, now that we talk more about it and the more I see it, is definitely something I want to do going forward. I mean, I see plenty of athletes' pages now that they almost need them to be recruited, or they believe that, and maybe it's a part of it these days, but they have a page that just has highlights, and they have zero posts, and it just has followers and people they follow. There's nothing on it but maybe some short information, and it's like their fake account that nobody else sees what's really going on.
Yeah, the Finsta account. Yeah,
the Finsta account, which is dangerous, right? Because people they still have that then fake one that maybe things are going on that they're tying their life to, of a life that's not real, right? To them, they kind of put themselves out there as that same talk sometimes about social media, that's that fake reality. They are looking for those likes to maybe feel good and get that immediate boost of adrenaline or that instant gratification, like, oh, my phone went off, somebody liked my post, what I look like, is ultimately usually half the time what it is, rather than more time posting probably highlights of what they're doing. But I think that's also dangerous. Even the highlights of what you are as an athlete, they start to, you get hundreds of likes on it somehow, some way, and you again start to tie your identity solely to that. And eventually that's no longer going to be around for many of the athletes, unfortunately, but that's the way it is, that they're not all going to go off to, let's say, the pros. They're not all going to go off to college. We'd all love to, of course, but when that's gone, who are we? So I make it a point, I mean, beyond the social media, when I work with teams and one-on-one, to really discuss the athlete identity and really talking about who they are beyond that sport, right? Who is John? Who are you? And really ask that question. And then, sometimes they like something else, hopefully, and be like, all right, so then can you separate that? Where's the time that you don't do sport? Because sport's something that you do, not who you are. And that's part of that social media. Like, who are you outside of sport? There's probably a social media account that has everything else you do and maybe no sport, right? And then so that's something out there. But then, is that still also the real you? I mean, is it the the guy and the girl that just sits in sweatpants at home, or are you always glammed up and the whole thing is whatever life you're putting out there and taking pictures in a fake airplane? I don't know, but I think it's very dangerous, like you're saying, and it's that perception of what it is. I mean, it can be something, to be honest, I think it can be something good. The cell phone has already been talked about something that's bad all the time. And I recently heard something that talked about it being, it can be good. And I said, but how? And it got into that. And it was really like, it's about us being the ones and how we use it that is probably more dangerous than itself, right? The phone was not designed to do that. Gives us access to all these things, but we have a choice of how we actually put ourselves out there. We have a choice of how much we use the phone. It's hard. It can be addicting. And for teenagers and youth athletes these days, up through college and up through beyond, it can be a bad thing. But for some, it can be a really great thing and can help them build something for them and a brand and a life. But I think maybe we need to talk more about what we're doing with it rather than just, it's bad, take it away, don't do it. Because that's something they rebel against naturally anyways, or they're just going to do it. There's not much we can really do about it. Just much like winning or losing and other topics of sport, it's what can we control? Control the controllables. The controllables are things like, our choices and our preparation and what we're doing with the phone, not necessarily the phone itself.
Yeah, it's interesting as you all were talking about this. I'm starting to think about the fact that there's some similarities here because Brandon also coaches a travel team that's around that same age group that you're dealing with, Zach. And on one of the last shows, it might have actually been the last show, Brandon and I were talking about the importance for coaches to align on goals and to also manage expectations and kind of make sure that the things that you're talking about are consistent with what they're hoping to get out of a certain experience or whatever. And one of the things I was thinking about as you were just talking was asking, I think it's a good question for all the travel coaches out there, both the two that are here on this program and then the many that are listening out there, is asking them ahead of time in some sort of a preseason thing is, what are you hoping to get out of this season? Like what are your goals? And start to figure out what they're saying, like it, because if they start talking about external things, then you're going to know, okay, we have to have some conversations here. But if they're talking about the internal, I'm trying to get better as a player, I'm working on skills, those are some of the things that you're going to want to start listening for. What made me think about this was I've been working with a young college baseball player, and he is, because of his age and classification, went through this past baseball season, wasn't, getting a lot of ABs, didn't get a lot of playing time, but he's going down to summer league to play in the summer league. And I was telling him, I said, I think it's really important that you go into this with the right mindset. When you go into summer league with the right mindset of it's a great opportunity that you have to work on, kind of skill development, getting better, get your reps in, all of those things that are really important. And let's talk. So that's what it is, right? It's an opportunity for you to go play baseball, but here's what it is not. This is not going to be an opportunity for you to go prove your college coach wrong, that you should have been in the lineup a little bit more than you were this spring. It's not an opportunity for you to make up for lost time. It's not an opportunity for you. Like, there's a lot of things that it's not. And so I think when we can work with players on the difference between what it is and keep them in the present versus what it's not, which is that external and, outer things that they can't control, that's so important to do.
Sure.
Zach, how do you can you kind of walk us through what does a mental performance practice or session look like with you, whether it's through ACME or on the volleyball team, or what does that look like?
For me, I kind of break it down to be as simple as possible. And what I mean by that is, let's say from a starting point of like an intake session, and I haven't really started with them yet. I do those calls usually where I provide a mental skills questionnaire first to them ahead of time, usually if I can. If not, I do it with them on my actual call or in person with a team. And I try to get a significant gauge on what it is that they maybe are lacking in a little bit in terms of the mental performance side. Because depending on the level that they're at, many of them has been introduced to some of it already, or they've heard a ton of different concepts or things that they've been maybe spoken to by a coach or yelled at. We don't know to concentrate or to focus. But what does that mean, and how do I do it? So the mental skills questionnaire breaks down a lot of different topics in very short, kind of a rating scale of like a 1 to 6, and it spits out kind of eventually what are some of the top 3 things that they might need to work on. And those categories, for example, are imagery, mental preparation, self-confidence, anxiety and worry is kind of one together, concentration, relaxation, and motivation. I mean, kind of usually the top 7 categories of mental performance a little bit. I'm sure there's more always that we can always unpack at times, but kind of gives you a basic guideline for them. And that kind of gives me an idea of where they need some of the work initially. And then we can always work on all the other ones, of course, and we would, depending on how many sessions from there. But those top 3, kind of introduce another topic to them, usually kind of control the controllables, I think is really one of the tops and very easy to kind of talk about at first and just kind of give them something to walk away with. Such as like kind of picturing that as your ape, your attitude, your preparation, and your energy level. So I kind of do that. And then from that guide of where they probably were their three main things, I have a number of different kind of presentations, so to speak. At least this Zoom is easiest still, the way kind of the world kind of went from COVID. Do some in person, but if we're not, it's easier. I got Zoom together because I can talk to them at 7 or 8 o'clock at night like we're doing, because they're athletes that are not home until that time, if they're lucky and even had a chance to eat dinner, which normally they're eating while they're talking to me, to be honest with you. I kind of developed some presentations built around a lot of things that I've learned and a lot of experience, and give them more of an educational background on said topic. And I think the presentations help because it's visual. If they want to take notes, obviously they can, but I want them to be present and kind of in the conversation. And I then supply that to them usually afterwards anyways, and be like, you can now review this and know what maybe our homework assignment maybe was, or something to work on afterwards, but here this is, you can take your own time and do some notes. But I think the education is first and foremost important. So whether that, like I said, is imagery, it's not just like, okay, now let's sit here and try to imagine our bedroom, but what is imagery? How does imagery work? How does the brain work? What's the science maybe behind some of it? And then getting into how we then can use it. Because I think, like I said, somebody like a coach, and we've all been there, and I probably still am sometimes, telling someone to focus or concentrate, and they're, sitting there going like, I am, or it's like, what do you mean? How do I do that? And so it's important, I think, to educate first, talk to them how they maybe have experienced it or how they perceive that topic in their own, like you said, the perception of things. And then if they've implemented it before or have tried, and then, like I said, get their feedback and feelings about it, and then get into how it can be applied now to what they're experiencing and what they're doing. And that's kind of where a lot of my mental performance sessions have gone. And it's been helpful thus far when I've done them to do it in that way, that it guides them a lot. And they kind of say that the presentations help. It lets me look at it and understand it rather than an adult like we do in teaching. I think, I'm sure there are those things, and they almost are like, oh my God, school again. but they're at least used to that experience, but now they can still see it rather than we're just like talking at them. Right. And they get a little bit, at least, of that autonomy. They can have a conversation and also see something. So it's not just like trying to remember the big words I might throw out there sometimes. That's kind of what I've done. And I think it's really helped.
Did you find when you first started with this that I assume you probably had some expectation of what you thought the most common pain points were going to be with your athletes? Were those validated? Was it, as you started working with athletes, were you finding like, wow, I didn't realize that would be such a big deal, whatever that was?
I was validated. Really, the common pain points that I found among athletes of varying ages from 11 to 17 have been pretty close to what I expected. After doing a number of the mental skills questionnaires and kind of comparing and contrasting them a little bit to kind of gain those strengths and weaknesses as it relates to mental performance, I think the tops, not surprisingly to me, were anxiety and worry management, self-confidence, and relaxation. So just the constant worry and concern about their performance and I think how they look and what they're doing, who's watching them, am I going to get playing time? Am I going to get ripped out of the game? And this is the team now we're about to play. They're my rival, or now we're in the playoffs. And anything like that, then to their self-confidence has been broken by coaches from an early on, usually stage, that have yelled at them over X, Y, and Z. And they're on the field or they're on the court, and they get the playing time now, but now they are afraid to even get the ball. I just spoke to somebody recently that that was kind of a main thing. And that kind of was shocking to me, only in the sense of to finally realize how much of an impact, which I always thought, but how much of an impact those coaches that are still yelling or acting in a way that's to such creating feelings of resentment or fear than it helping, right? I'm not going to say that a coach that does that is wrong. Everyone has their own styles, and some kids and athletes gravitate towards them, or it works for some. But we have to understand who we're working with and try to develop our coaching around that. It can't be the same across the board. And to get to a point where a child, no matter what age, is fearful to even want the ball, but they're on the field and they're like, I get to play, but I got to the point where I don't even want it. It's terrible. That can't happen. And trying to then break that as a mental performance coach is very hard and very possible. But to hear that, like, we're setting these athletes up for failure to start. I mean, and to see them then talk about that, then I have anxiety and worry, and then I have this, and then it's all built from you being yelled at 6, 7, or it was 15. I mean, it doesn't make a difference. We need to understand the impact of our words as coaches and people, and just as much as they do, right? If we're going to tell them that they need to work on their self-talk or their talk to each other as teammates, we better take a look in the mirror and realize what we're saying and how we're saying it to them, because it's going to be embodied throughout our culture, and it's not going to help to kind of be that leader that they're looking at and act in such a way. And then relaxation, it kind of trickles down, right? From that maybe it's self-confidence at the top. If you flip it all and creates anxiety and worry, and then you get to relaxation, they don't know how to relax. Their lives are such go, go, go. As the three of us talked a little bit about social media, and it's like, okay, where's the next picture I'm taking? What's the next thing I'm doing? I went to school. I hate school. We all hated school, but I had to go to school. Then I had practice. Then I went to second batting practice after that, or shooting for my soccer team, my soccer coach that I have private. And then I got home at 8:00, had a quick dinner, did my homework, maybe got to bed at 12:00, and woke up the next day and did it all over again. The chicken with the head cut off kind of thing, right? They have no clue of how to relax, let alone how to relax in performance if things are going wrong, and how to not unravel that tornado, so to speak, which we can always get into a little bit on by social media, but that's like kind of all spirals. And once you start to spiral, they just don't know how to stop it. And then, relax. You tell them to maybe try this progressive muscle relaxation, and they go, I didn't like the guy's voice on it, and it's mine. I said, find another one on YouTube. I don't know what to tell you. I don't really like it either, but you can record yourself, sure, but here's the script. But how'd that go? And it's like, I couldn't sit still for 2 minutes, and it's like, well, because what's going on? You have no clue. So giving them those tools, I think, to try and manage. It's about managing, I think, is a big word I like to use. It was anxiety worry management, and you talked about the perception or how to handle it. It's the management is the key. I think, because we can't completely get rid of these things. That's not logical. So they try to bring it up, and the parent is like, they have self-confidence issues, and I wish they wouldn't have this, or the anxiety is high, and maybe they do take medication, they do this, but it's never going to go away. So how do we deal with it? So how do we manage it in a way that we can still perform at our personal, maybe highest level more consistently, regardless of what our outcomes may be, but giving them tools that they can take away and maybe even tweak on their own, right? They can be unique for them. But basically, like you said, I mean, the pain points to me, and I don't know if your guys' experience is different, but that's been the main things for me.
Well, it's interesting to hear, because for sure, the boys that I coach at 14, the anxiety, to me, I was surprised by it. Quite frankly, like the anxiety level, the fact that as an athlete, they don't always look like they're enjoying themselves out there, which as a coach and as a father, you start to question, then why are you out here, right? Like, this So we did this thing the other day. We were not having a very good round of infield. And so I brought everybody in, and we threw all the baseballs to the side. I said, all right, now get back out there. I said, you're getting ready for the first time ever to have a perfect round of infield outfield. And we went straight through it without the ball. And they're laughing. They're having a good time. They're talking. Everything is upbeat. And I brought them back in. I said, guys, that little ball is not – it's not a stress ball. Like, that is not something to introduce stress in your life. Like, you get to play. So, back to John's point about perception, this is something you get to do, not something you have to do. And as it does make me wonder where the anxiety comes from. And I do, without going too deep into it, most of the kids that are in their early teens right now were very impressionable as COVID started. And I think for them to have learned or lived through a time where, without, this is generalization, obviously, but where things are mainly stable, they have a routine, and then all of a sudden it just gets thrown in a blender. And this thing that at that age, they don't think they have a lot of control anyway, all of a sudden they have no control. And they start looking around, and it's almost like being a product of divorce, right? Where there's this stability and then there's not. And depending upon your age, and I've gone through a divorce, I've got 3 kids, and they've all kind of reacted differently. And I think a lot of it had to do with their age and all that. But to see that, to me, that has been the biggest byproduct of the COVID piece is, one, just they have realized they don't necessarily have the control, I think, that they thought they had, or the security or stability. And so it's created this super anxious individual in general, but athlete for sure. I think the other challenge that you brought up is the amount of stuff that parents try to make their kids do. And you said something, Zach, earlier about one of the things that they want, and one of the things that you do as a coach, which I think is great, is you're giving them the opportunity to decide, what do you want to do at the end of practice? And parents aren't allowing their kids to do that now. And so there is no buy-in from the kid. So when it starts going bad, it's real easy for them to be like, I didn't want to be here any damn way. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, who cares? I mean, this is your thing. So it's really interesting. I to hear that from you, because we're talking about boys versus girls. You're talking about regionalization. You're kind of up north and we're down south. And there's all this kind of there's some differences there, but to hear that anxiety seems to be the prevailing challenge is interesting to me.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, and like, it's funny kind of going to bring up that, like, the geographic differences or guy, girl, they, them, whatever it is, at the end of the day, we're all people, right? And they have a tendency to not realize that they are, because they're so tied to what they're doing. And then, like you said, the sports that they've been doing since a young age that their parents put them in. And then eventually the parents are concerned with if I want my kid to play sports, they start to find the nooks and the crannies within the community that are like, if you didn't start at 5 years old, your kid's going to be left behind. And now they're like, well, then how do I start at 5 years old? I played soccer as a kid. I love soccer. All right, I got to get, Johnny in there to start playing at 5, whether he can really do it or not. and then I'm just going to keep going. And then when you start putting in that time and that money that you're making as a parent, as an adult, to their kid, and then they start to usually sometimes burn out, or they're not liking it as much as you might, they start to still push it. Mm-hmm. And then that's why I think sometimes they get to those conversations, which we're not always privy to, of like, you know, yeah, you have to go to practice. We're paying this money. What do you mean you don't want to go? What's going on? Right. Why didn't your teammate do this? Why did you do that on the field? We traveled all the way, whatever it is, right? When you get in the car. And to me, and when you take your kid home, it should, you know, and I'm hopefully don't completely spoil my upcoming first child this way, but it's, you know, when you get in the car, it's like take them home and give them dinner, and that's it, right? Maybe then ask them about homework, sure, and they might snap at you, but you have no place to start asking them why something happened in their game and what's going on with Susie and whatever, because that starts to get that resentment. And like, what do you mean you're talking to me about my performance and what's going on? Like, yes, you're paying the money because you want to support me, but if you're going to support me, be on the sidelines, ready with that water and ready to support me if things really go awry and I really need it. I will come talk to you. If you pry, that's going to create more of that anxiety, more of that worry, because the amount of times I've seen a parent basically close their eyes when a 13-year-old or anything is about to serve a ball over a net, and that same child can look over at mom and see them do that, and they're like, she's not even watching me, or she, you know, and then they think that they don't see that, and they come like later on and talk to them, and I'm like, why didn't you do the serve you normally do? And they're like, well, my dad said I should probably stay standing and do this because it's safer. What are you talking about? Right. No wonder you're terrified to do anything. You don't want to make a mistake because they're watching you and thinking that this is the Olympics, or I don't know. But I get it. They're paying for you. They take you. They all this time. And somewhere we're getting lost in the translation of, I think, the care and what's really behind it. And it's coming out in a bad way sometimes, I think, for some.
Well, the parent feels like, the parent feels like they're doing the right thing by the athlete. That's the big issue, is that all of the things are coming from a place of, you know, I always think about it's the scene in Tommy Boy where Chris Farley's holding the roll and he's talking about this little bird, and he's like, squeezing it and he's loving on it so much, but he ends up crumbling the roll. Because it does come from a good place, but I think you both are talking about some really, really important things here, because, you know, we just had Ashley Merriman on from one of the co-authors of the book Top Dog, The Science of Winning and Losing. I'd highly recommend that book. But she was talking about, you know, what you're saying there's actually some science behind this idea that if you let people play a certain game or a sport or whatever the case may be, and you just let them do it on their own, they're so much more successful than all of a sudden when somebody starts watching them or whatever. But something I want to make sure we kind of circle around, because I thought as Brandon was talking about this idea of in the control, right? It's like everything that they feel like, you know, whether it's pre-COVID, during the pandemic, whatever the case would be, it's another opportunity where they've lost control of things. But then, Zach, people like yourself and other, you know, all of us that are in that kind of mental performance space are talking to them about controlling the controllables, and they can't even register that because they're like, have you like paid any attention to my day? Like, I don't control anything. Like, my dad tells me when I'm going to practice. My dad tells me when I'm going to get a drink. He tells me what my post-game routine's going to be. Like, and then we come in later on and are like, hey, listen, I want you to be in that circle of control right before the pitch or right before the serve in volleyball, whatever the case may be. And it just like all of a sudden is mind blowing to them, because they're like, I can't wrap I can't wrap my head around this, you know. So very interesting. So talk to me, Zach, about ACME. You know, first of all, did the name, was that purposeful? Like, what is ACME, and why did you choose that particular name for ACME Mentality?
So when developing the name for my brand or my company, once I started, getting closer to finishing my degree and understanding that I wanted to take this to the next level and see how I can best do that. Talking to my wife about things. She has her own business, and she was like, "Well, you need an LLC eventually. You should build, a brand, and kind of get that out there." And from doing a lot of like research on social media and different things of like names of similar mental performance brands or people on LinkedIn and all those across the board, many at first were very much like last name and then kind of what you do. I mean, they just kind of, maybe it lended itself to something more unique, but something like my last name and just doing like Cohen Mental Performance, I didn't think was had a really strong tag to it and would be something that would resonate. And it just didn't, sound great to me. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to do the last name thing. And then you start to find tons of, the word, I guess, quote, air quotes, quote unquote, the pinnacle, the peak, and so on and so forth, like that. Everyone's peak performance, pinnacle, right? So that's very similar. And those are great. That makes sense. It's kind of about reaching for something. But there were so many on there, whether they were even actual businesses yet, or they just had those names, right? So those things were kind of taken. In trying to do something a little bit more uncommon, but kind of tied to excellence and that idea of kind of reaching for something or a higher point, kind of looked up synonyms for those same things and landed on ACME, not to be confused with the supermarket brand and company out there. So hopefully they don't ever come after me. But ACME is the name because by definition, ACME is the point at which someone or something is best or most successful. So very similar into that same vein of peak, performance excellence, pinnacle, those similar kind of words, but it had a little bit more causing people to be like you said, like, what is that, right? Because it's not something so familiar. It doesn't really just hit you right away, which is why my logo, I've tried to kind of build in kind of like the mountain and kind of picture that as being like something still you're striving towards. Because, perfection is not really attainable. We can strive for it, but it's quite difficult. Well, we can be super successful in each performance, but how does that then look? And that's when then the mental performance, I think, aspect comes in and helps you to reach your ACME. I want them to reach for their ACME. I then also realized it kind of lends itself to kind of two other words, whereas the AC can stand for like accountability, and the ME can stand for me, right, for yourself. So you're basically, in essence, you're accountable for yourself in order to pursue the excellence that you're striving for. So once it kind of built around there, it was kind of that aha moment. And I was like, oh, I'll stick with this. It can kind of be that thing where we're going to get people like, I'm not really sure what you do. I don't know what ACME means. Half the time, some can't always say it correctly. But it gets the conversation started usually. And we can kind of go from there.
You're too young, but I was really, really hoping it was because you were a Wile E. Coyote fan.
I was thinking the same thing.
I mean, I watched it when I was a kid. I'm not too young.
Because here's the thing. As unsuccessful as he was at catching the Roadrunner, and everything he used was some kind of Acme product, he never, ever, ever gave up.
No.
Ever. Which was like, so when I hear that and I hear Acme, the first thing that came to my mind was, wow, number one, Wiley. And that's the thing. I think so many people, not to go off on a tangent, so many people looked at him as this, I don't know, like a misfit. I always had a little admiration for the guy because he was creative. He never gave up. I mean, it was just, anyway, we'll get back to it. But I was hoping that there was maybe just a little homage to Wile E. Coyote in there.
Oh, right. Maybe there is. I've always seeked to possibly getting a tattoo. So maybe that'll be it someday.
There you go. Holding the Acme bar.
Holding the Acme bar, right? And then, like you said, I think now that I picture that too, it's, that bomb and anything else always exploded and it didn't do anything. Obviously, It was a cartoon. He appeared, right? So he persevered
always
through whatever
persevered.
his problems were.
Always.
The thing exploded, he got flattened, and he came right back, right? So there's something there for sure.
For sure. So that's awesome.
Zach, I almost said it's interesting, but I didn't want somebody to take a shot.
Hey, no, I was going to say, for all of our listeners doing the drinking game.
So one of the things that you just talked about there, as far as peak, everybody using elite, peak, and, it makes me think about something that when we had Brett McCabe on one of the shows that we did with him, when he was talking about his book, Break Free from Suckville. And one of the things that takes people into this place known as Suckville is they feel like they haven't reached their potential. And, we just were talking about this in the last couple of minutes, is that, like you said, perfection's never really, it's not attainable in a sense. It's almost like, really, when you think about it, becomes this moving target, because like Brett said on the show, what he tries to impress upon people is this idea of potential, reaching our max potential is never going to happen, because potential always changes. Mm-hmm. So this journey we're on to reach the mountaintop, well, your mountaintop is going to change as you get better. So it's really a climb that we continue to be on. And it's something I think is always very interesting. I just had that conversation yesterday with somebody who was sharing that experience of listening to Brett kind of break that down.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because like I said, I kind of always promote, like, reach for it, reach for your ACME, or maybe you can reach our ACME potential. But like you said, it's almost like outcome related goals, or even just winning versus losing, or actually scoring or winning the championship. You get to the top, then what? The other side is downhill. So you might as well just keep reaching for things, or at least once you get there, then you're going to have to set another goal for the next higher mountain to climb, because you just reached now. Like, do you actually feel better? And you just, are you done now? Like, it's over, or does this continue? What goes on from here? Right? We're almost like that, the yodeling mountain guy on The Price is Right. So before he falls up and makes a little sound, he just keeps going up. And that's kind of, I guess we're all just yodeling through life, but you're kind of reaching, exactly like you said, it's where do we get to, and what does that look like? And it's always changing, and that's good. We should want that change. We should want to be able to pivot and adapt, and not just want things to be so super standard and just like, that's it, that it ends there. Because if it does, then what's the point of what we're doing? Especially if we're athletes, right? That's why setting those, we can always probably at another time or get into the conversations about goals and different things. That's why you set those process goals, those performance goals, to try and reach that outcome. Because if you're just so focused on the dream or the outcome and you get there, then what, right? Or like, if, you've seen those Instagram clips for a while back of some kids, like little kids playing a soccer game and running around, and like what they were saying, like their parent was telling them to do. And the kid was like, my dad said if I score 5 goals, I get Chinese. And it's like, all right, so that's so now you got the Chinese food. Now you should just never score again. Or, my dad says if we win, I go to Disney. All right, so you went to Disney. Now what? Now you're just done. You don't play a sport anymore. Or you just keep seeking that extrinsic reward. So you're not doing it for yourself anymore. It's not fun. It eventually becomes like, what do I get? And you get to play. That's what you get.
Yeah. Well, and what they find, I mean, the research suggests that it becomes very unfulfilling, the actual reward itself, the actual outcome itself. Like, people misunderstand this all the time. It's not the Super Bowl rings that Tom Brady hungers for. It's the process of getting the Super Bowl rings that Tom Brady is addicted to. Like, that's the thing that most of the time these elite athletes, you don't even have to be elite. You could be just searching for your, recreation championship T-shirt that they're going to hand out at the end of your rec league or whatever. We've all been a part of those teams where you're like, you finally get to that championship game, you win, and you're like, oh, okay. Like, When's next season start? Because it was that journey. It's kind of like, to take this in a really different direction, but it's almost like why people are attracted to the courtship more than the relationship. Because it's that work that you have to put into it. It's the same thing when it comes to sports, the same thing when it comes to business. You're trying to get that new title at work or that new step in your career, and you've busted your butt and you're doing all the performance things and you're working on all of the ways that you're going to, foster your career and building advocates and stuff like that. And then you get it and you're like, all right, like now what, and then usually what you end up doing is finding the next rung to go chase, because that's what got you out of bed in the morning. It wasn't the title, and it goes back to your identity you were talking about earlier. And that's what we have to continue to impress upon the young athletes that we deal with, the old athletes that we deal with, the business clients we deal with, or whatever is, you are going to really, when you love the process and you get really caught up in how enjoyable that can be, that's the cool thing. That's why people become very, what you would call goal oriented. It's not so much that they're just these high achievers. It's that they're high workers who just want to constantly give themselves something else to go after. Brandon is one of these people, having been his, really good friend for a lot of years. And I'm not going to age either one of us over 30, but but he is somebody that, it's why he participates in CrossFit. It's why he's so successful in work. It's why he's a great father. It's like all of these things aren't because of the fact that he just wants, it's like he picks new challenges because he loves the journey of getting to the challenge. Like that's something I think is really interesting.
Hey, I was gonna say, hey, we're gonna save this one. I'm writing down when this was said. It's gonna be my new voice message. I appreciate that.
Exactly.
That's where you need those drops. You need those
that's it. Hey,
drops.
back at it.
Great
Zach.
father. There's a lot of things.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden we'll have video clips of that one. That will show up on Instagram. Yeah. Sure. But no, there is something I think. I think to kind of wrap that thing back around to what we were saying earlier about parents and stuff is that's why it's so important when you're talking to your kids as a parent, when you're talking to your players as coaches, is make sure that you're rewarding behaviors, make sure you're rewarding the things that are involved in the process. So don't talk to them about, oh, I'm so glad that you got straight A's this year. I'm so glad that you studied at least 15 to 20 minutes every night, and that you made sure you got your homework done right when you got home from school, and that you made some sacrifices about wanting to play video games, but instead of doing that, you studied or whatever. Like that's getting them in love with the process. And the more you can get them in love with the work early, then the outcomes will all come long after that's over,
right. Right. Yeah. Like I said, I it's not like I wanted to come on here and bash parents. I'm about to be one myself for the first time. I can't say I'm perfect, but to be the coach, right, of a sport and the outside, the inside of a day to day with them every so often outside of their home. And then to see sometimes the interactions, you kind of say, what's going on here? And then how can I help? But I'm only a small piece. And something's got to start there, or it's got to start somewhere. And then sometimes, like you said, then there's a coach who actually is a parent. And how are they then treating the kids that they're then working with? And what does that look like in their home? And it's a large piece of it. And that kind of like attachment theory that's out there. Like, how did you kind of do those things when they were very, very little? Did you let them climb? And what did you do? Or the minute they cried, what happened? Because that starts that snowball in their mental process going. But, I from that point of view, like I'm only with some of these kids as far as when I, outside of the mental performance game, when I was coaching 2 nights a week, a couple of weekends out of 5 months, travel here or there, spend obviously a decent amount of time with them. At least I tried to with like a head coach of mine, and would not always just, go to those team dinners with them, then sit with the kids, right? And not just be like, I coach the team and that's it. Like get to know them and talk to them. We're to the point where like there's some I still talk to 6-7 years later, right? Now they're past 21 and, and there's a totally different relationship. And then where they reach out randomly 2 years after coaching them at 16s or not even a year later. And they're like, can you write me this honor society letter to try to help me get this, or to help me get this camp job if you can, or again, they send me an email years down the road and they're in college and they're doing some random math class, but it starts talking about growth mindset in some way. And they're like, and I immediately thought of the little weekend seminar we did when I was, 16. And you're like, well, see, I kind of knew what I was talking about.
Right.
But, I wasn't wasting your Saturday, believe me. And it matters, and you're with them 2 days a week and you clearly have such an impact, which means the impact is also there from the other side. And it's got to start there, I think, sometimes, to help them all develop into the people that we all hope for them to be, or to give them the chance to find themselves. And like, you guys said that, in the pandemic, they kind of got locked in a box, almost into the box of Zoom for 2 years. And I think they kind of got fearful of being left behind. You kind of brought up like what the anxiety was. Hey, maybe you weren't the best lacrosse player on your team, but the ones that were really good probably are still going to be really good once you're done with this. And now what do you do? And are you just, where were you when everything picks back up? The fear of that a little bit, and that stigma. And then like, now who am I? What do I do? And how do I go about that is what made things pretty difficult, I think, is where a piece of that, to circle back to that, is kind of where that came from a little bit to me. Their life became this box rather than the day-to-day that they were used to. But again, like you said, the day-to-day that they were planned out half the time. So I think, like you said, giving them that choice and like, okay, like choosing a sport, but then like not so much maybe just choosing whether or not you go to practice, but if you're not going to practice, what else are you doing? Is it because you do need to study? Because when you get the kids that come to practice just 2 nights a week, and then they go, my mom made me stay home because I had to study for my math test. Well, why didn't you study for your math test all week? And you were prepared, and you could spend 2 hours at practice with us to get our team better, to get you better, because you love to be here and you have this game. But my text message from whatever your mom or from you says, I have to stay home to study. I have you knew you had the test, but your day is planned out because mom thinks that you didn't, or you have the Regents. Yes, you have the Regents, but is it because you need to get straight A's, or is it because what is it? Because why doesn't volleyball matter anymore? Why doesn't soccer? Why doesn't baseball matter now? You're paying the money, but now is it that they have a test to take and they're challenging themselves in school and you should let them figure that out, I think? Or is it because you expect them to have A's and that should be on your fridge, and it's like, is it your life or is it theirs?
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to making sure you're asking those questions early on. Like I was saying earlier, is what are you hoping to get out of this season? What are you hoping to get out of this, 4 years if they're a freshman in college, like whatever that is, because that's something you can bring back to them too. You can say, you're the one who said that you wanted to become the best, whatever. Like I used to do that to my kids all the time. When my son was in high school and early on, I was like, what are you hoping to do, with your 4 years of high school? He's like, I want to play, college sports or whatever. So I would always go back to when I saw behaviors that were contrary to that goal, was you're the one who told me you wanted to do this. Like, it's okay if you change that, but I'm just reminding you, I'm identifying blind spots for you because these are things that you maybe don't recognize right now, but you're heading in the wrong direction than that goal that you set, or maybe the behaviors you're doing anyhow. So I think it's all really good stuff. And guys, this is what you can find, whether you're finding Zach on Twitter at ACME Mentality. It's just all one word, ACME Mentality, no underscore, anything like that. ACME. You can watch the Roadrunner for spelling if you don't get that. And then www.acmementality.com is the website. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, working with players one-on-one, doing team stuff. I mean, you kind of are pretty much doing a little bit of everything. Is there a questionnaire? Is there an email that they can fill out when they get to your website? What can they expect? They
can expect the contact information is there. It's just, you can just send me an email. I don't have a form currently. One is in development, but it basically just guides you towards sending me either an email or reaching out to me via phone or text. That number that's on there is a Google Voice number and is a simple business line that anyone can get to. And you can always DM me on the social media things such as Twitter and Instagram, which is acme.mentality. And you can always reach out to me that way if anyone was ever interested. That's kind of the best way to reach out to us there.
Good deal. Well, man, keep it up. I mean, we're always rooting for those people like yourself who are out there kind of working with athletes, younger the better, on all the importance of the mental skills and just kind of continuing to work on all the systems and strategies it takes to get themselves to understand what's important in the moment, staying in the moment, whether it's through visualization, imagery, whatever the case may be, controlling the controllables, all the things we talk about. But it's so important to have a coach that's going to help guide them through that. So kudos to you for doing that.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. This was great. The conversation was fantastic. And I hope it leads to further conversations for you guys in other episodes as well, kind of circling back to some of the things we talked about. I'm excited to listen going forward. And, maybe we'll have another conversation again sometime. This is awesome.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yep. 100%. Thanks, Zach. We appreciate it.
Want to provide feedback or stay up to date with the show? Visit our Instagram page at Mental Advantage Podcast, or you can send us an email at podcast@mentaladvantage.net. To have John Cullen work with you or your team, please write to him at john.cullen@mentaladvantage.net. Thanks for listening to today's episode.